Playable books or serious games is where I'm coming from, and I'll explain why in a moment. But I also want to talk about the future of publications is that they're going to love you. Now that's pretty provocative, but I'll explain how, and it's actually possible today. So just to add to what Eloise said about me, I'm a dynamicist. That means from the field of engineering, somebody who believes in dynamic rather than static process, and I certainly see that in technology and society. I've got a psychology and media background, so I've observed audiences now for the better part of 25 years formally in my research, and I've seen, of course, a great deal of change, as have you. And I've been involved with emerging media, and particularly the intersection between emerging media, audience reception, and policy. For example, the R18+ debate that many of you might be familiar with related to computer games. So I introduced at my university a Bachelor of Computer Games. That went down badly in the law faculty. They think that's well below anything that a tertiary institution should be doing. But we have very strong enrollments. And the best news is we're placing 3/4 of students on graduation out into jobs, including on the Gold Coast. A great growing developer called Binary Mill is scooping them up, and they're growing quickly. They sell gun apps to Americans. We'll just leave the morality in check for a moment. I also introduced the Bachelor of Multimedia, and similarly, those students are finding great opportunities. And one of the reasons I want to talk to you today is that, of course, I know that we all face disruption. Your sector and the tertiary sector, for example, are being deeply disrupted by the changes that are before us. I get that, you get that, but let's face it, you and I have had a long time to get ready for what's happening and what Sabine was just talking about. I love this from Ralph Lombriglia, writing in Atlantic Online years ago. This is exactly 15 years ago to this week, in fact. It's a quote I've used in my classes for years when I talk about digital publishing. We all know that digital media are transforming the publishing industry and our literary culture. Yes, true, there's even a book on Twiterature, as you probably know. But I like this bit here where it says it's time for publishers to return the favor. So get ready, guys. Grab your keyboards and your iPads and your production tools, and let's rewrite what the internet is supposed to be about and show people that it can actually be a tool for great idea exchange in addition to all those things that we might criticize, for example, violence and pornography and so on. So we've had 15 years, but let me just be a little bit indulgent here as well, and also have a little bit of fun. Spare a thought for the pet toy industry. They're being disrupted as well. And I'm pleased to say that my students and my institution have been a part of this. Have a look at this video.
My name's Saxon Cameron, and I'm a student at Bond University studying a Bachelor of Computer Games. This year I created a game called The Affection Collection for cats, and it reached #1 in the iPad free download store. The RSPCA, they commissioned the university to make a game. They said they wanted a game, or like a toy for cats to play on the iPad. Basically, my idea was that if I could get cats to interact with a game that had human game mechanics, it would appeal to the human owners, and that way we could spread awareness through social media. It's really exciting to be able to work for this company and knowing that what I was working on would be representing this really cool organization. There's a balance in the Bachelor where we go between practical and theoretical. So this is probably the 3rd or 4th game that I've made during the degree. I had a lot of help from the lecturers and tutors helping me come up with game design. They taught me a lot of what I applied to it. Once the game had been released, the feedback I got from the university was just overwhelming. These are the kind of games that you're going through the App Store, just like any other regular person, and there's one time I see a game that I created. When it reached #1, I was literally lost for words. I never saw it being this successful, and it's been really fantastic.
You know, it's not easy to get to #1 in the App Store and get a bit of traction. This thing went viral, and we all went, wow, isn't this great? Now, he's a scholarship student. He's a very good student. He's from Adelaide. He's a lovely human being. I mean, the way he comes across on camera is the way he is. He's just the most beautiful man. And he designed this game by himself and had some help with a bit of the art, but he did all the code, and there we go. So now, pet toys, beware. The internet is coming to you, too. Now, to contextualize what I want to say, and part of my mission here today is to just have a little bit of a show of some things that I've found interesting and why I found them interesting from a publishing and education point of view. Let me just talk a little bit about this research quickly, just to put us into context. This is research I do for the Interactive Games and Entertainment Association, and it followed on from some research that I did with the Classification Board several years ago. We were interested in finding out what the digital footprint is in terms of households, particularly related to interactive games. It turns out that today, 92% of all Australian households have a device for playing computer games. If you have a child under the age of 18 in the house, it's 95%. Those two numbers used to be much further apart. Today, they're closing up primarily because what we see is the average age of gamers in Australia today is 32 years. And I think that's a pretty conservative number. The Americans say that their average age is 37. So compared to the rest of the world, we're just a little bit younger as gamers. But the point I would make is that the dynamics and the literacy to use interactive games is now so high that if you are a publisher interested in leveraging the affordances that are available through, and I'm not talking about playing with your cat necessarily, but through games that could be educational for humans, this would be a great space to be involved in. So here's the marriage, right? Dante's Inferno, a contentious and yet great work of poetic literature. I had it on my, actually it was on my Palm OS many years before I had it on the iPhone or the iPad. And of course, a company called Electronic Arts, one of the largest independent developers in the world, has made a computer game, quite a confronting game, that is based also on that text. The point here is that with transmedia storytelling and the back catalog of so many great pieces of fiction and nonfiction, what we can now do is leverage that IP in new and interesting ways. And indeed, even from the back catalog, The Hound of the Baskervilles has been made. Big Fish Games publishes literally hundreds of click text-based and graphically based adventure games perfectly ported to a variety of different devices, including the Android operating system and the iOS. And the interesting thing here is that they're actually leveraging a lot of the back catalog and showing how to play through a story. So with that brief introduction, let's have a little bit, and I chose my verb quite purposively, romp through a few of the A's and E's, apps and ebooks. Generally what's happening is I see it, we have, and I'll talk about technology in a minute in terms of the specifics, but we have two ways in which content is being delivered. It's either being delivered as a standalone app, or it's content that has been formatted to operate in a container, and then you can pump multiple pieces of content into that container, like magazines and so on. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to slip out of my slideshow, and the first thing I want to show you is National Geographic magazine. And to do that, I'm going to go into Zinio, because last year when I got it digitally, it was not available in the iPad newsstand, but it was available through this Zinio. How many of you used Zinio? Right. It's actually, quite a good service, and I've been getting the National Geographic magazine since I was a child. My father still has them all boxed up somewhere, his copies, and I have many of mine that I've given to schools now because I have the entire back catalog of the National Geographic on 4 DVDs. In any case, this is a very interesting publication. One thing that I can show you very quickly is if I go to their menu system, they've done some interesting things with the affordances provided in this environment, including having scroll down, or you can drill down as well as spread across the publication. And I quite like this, yeah, I'm pushing it, aren't I? I quite like this publication because they even do some really interesting new things with the cover to make it dynamic. This particular article is about dogs and how the variety in the dog genome can tell us a lot about human mutation and disease. When I then move through the publication, I see the on the upper left there the key cover article, and I can go to that article here, and we get a little bit of interesting animation off to the right. But what I love about the National Geographic and many other publications like it is, of course, the photography. And the captions don't necessarily get in the way of the photography unless you want them to. And then, of course, you can get rid of them again simply by clicking on the little I button. I also like the fact that they've really privileged, and they can in this environment, the photography in interesting new ways. So as I go down, I can then start to scroll down through the article and see new displays. Okay, fantastic stuff, right? So that's all I want to show you from the National Geographic. Let me now show you one of my favorite publications, and this is a magazine that, of course, should be in this space well and truly and doing interesting things. That's a nice cover, it grabs a bit of attention. It's perfectly suited to the video game generation with some interesting animations. And again, one of the things that I can do is I can scroll through the publication. Actually, it's quite efficient the way it does it. Let me talk about newspapers. How many of you have seen The Daily? Okay, so this is News Limited's publication, and there's really only one thing I want to show you other than this article that appears today on interactive sciences and this book published, Principles of Biology, $50, electronic textbook, web-based or HTML-based, out of Scientific American. So a very interesting piece here, but if I just go through a couple screens. Anyone like Sudoku? So I can actually play Sudoku right inside the app, and that's looking like a 7 to me. I picked an easy one, right? And that will be a 4, and I'm good to go with that line. So I can actually play games right inside the application. So this is the start of JavaScript and HTML5 working together in an EPUB environment. All right, that's all I want to show you from the daily. Let me move on to trade books very quickly, and I'll go into the iBooks environment. Now, I will have to say that I don't much care for iBooks primarily because of the lock-in with Amazon and other book services, one I've been using for years. In fact, with the Palm OS a few years ago, I can get my back library on multiple devices. So this environment is a little bit risky. All right, Plan 9 from outer space. Let's say I'm teaching students about the origins of sci-fi and film and storytelling in this context. I can read an interesting book on this particular topic in this particular film, which has a bit of a history to it. And what I really like, including having the bad special effects flying saucers in there, is I can actually watch the entire movie right inside the book. So the movie is now delivered with the book, and I can relive history. But we won't. So this is just a lovely example of how to tie in a clever way, and probably for really deep educational purposes, the entire film inside a book where you're studying the film. Let me show you, of course, DK, well known for their pretty eye candy publications. This one has crashed a few times, but let's see how we go. This is only a sample. I didn't bother to buy this one. But what's really fascinating is that in addition, and I'll just step away from the mic, I get the scale of the Morella. I can also decide that I think it's ugly and turn it upside down so it's less threatening to me, right? So this book is full of really interesting content, of course the usual videos, and if I click on the video, I can bring it up if I want to, but I can go back to the book. All right, that's all I want to show you from that one. All right, let me show you an example of a couple of textbooks, one of which I'm very grateful to the Oxford University Press for helping me out. I wanted to conduct a study. We've published 2 papers and presented 2 papers on this. This is Professor Terry Flew's book on new media. It's one that I've used in my class since it was originally published in 2008. This is just a lovely example of how we can deliver books to students that might be of interest to them. The most important thing I want to point out here is that whilst there isn't any multimedia content, there's a certain functionality that students absolutely value. Convergence. Did I get that right? No? Thank you. It's like writing in front of an audience as well. It's very risky. So put the keyboard down, and what I'm seeing is convergence not only displayed where it is in the book, but of course in context. Students love seeing words in context, and so I can scroll down, and the most important thing is if I'm revising for my exam, I think, well, that might be on there because there's 42 of them. This is just for the quantitative types in the room. All right, so that's Terry Flew's book, and thanks to Oxford University Press for preparing that specially for us for purposes of our study. I want to show you, how many of you have seen E.O. Wilson's Life on Earth? Just a couple? Okay, good, so it's worth showing. This one also crashed a few times, but it has some really nice interfaces, and I'll just show it to you quickly. All right. What I love about this book, in addition to the fact that the table of contents works a little differently from a normal table of contents. The table of contents is broken down into chapter sections, and then as you move, the whole chapter sort of flies across the page at the bottom. But in this chapter 2, now I'll just scroll across the bottom, at the end of, thank you, at the end of the chapter, there is a lovely opportunity to revise, and I can find out if I've learned anything right inside the book and get feedback immediately by choosing images on the screen. So a nice affordance with e-texts in this regard. All right, so that's textbooks. Let me just show you a couple of art books, two of them that I think are just absolutely beautiful. The first one is, I'll go back to the library, is an art book, and the author, Galath, has produced this Metamorphose book on her music, and of course has really some beautiful animations, but that isn't the half of it. We can actually learn about her music by moving into various chapters and listening. And we can look at the sheet music. Now, my youngest son is a pianist, and for me, this is really promising, right? Tempo, keystroke, the power, pedals. He can hear things that are happening by listening to the music, and then look at the sheet music and follow along. It's really quite provocative. Let me show you another one now. For this one, this is an app, so I've identified it slightly separately. This is called, how many of you have seen the 0 to 100 project? Group of universities. I think this is beautiful. It's just gorgeous. And the neat thing is, as I go through, I can actually scroll, and every 10 years they pick a person, he's gorgeous, and we can listen to him.
Oh, 50. Oh, Lord. To tell you the truth, growing up, I think like most people, I wouldn't hit 30. So every day after 30 is a bonus.
Okay, I'll stop it there. Every day after 30 is a bonus. Let's just all remember that, shall we? The next thing I want to show you is the fun bit. They've built in a little game. It really doesn't have a winning condition, but we can have a bit of fun. It's a face maker. And what it shows, of course, is the tremendous, and I think this is a great way to understand diversity in humanity. We can actually thanks, there we go. We can play with different faces and make really interesting things happen. And that's just the beginning. When you get to the section that I belong in, the wrinkly section and the bald section, it's really fun. All right, so we'll exit out of that. So a beautiful art game, a beautiful also social research game. I think a game like that in a class on gender and aging, for example, would be really interesting. It's great work. All right, now the next thing I want to show you is a marketing PR work that I actually found in The Economist magazine. I've been subscribing to The Economist electronically now for several years. It's about $100 a year. And because I've always believed that if anything is in The Economist, it has commercial value, and then I should be attending to it. And this is how I got very interested in multimedia and games several years ago as a possible business model for my institution. We're not alone, by the way. There are 500 universities around the world now offering a Bachelor of Computer Games. This particular publication is from Shell Oil. Now, I don't want to suggest for a moment, I have no shares in Shell. I have no shares in Apple either. But this is a very interesting application because it does some fantastic things. First of all, the affordances of the menu again. I can scroll down through the entire work. This is updated regularly, so the latest stories are here in the green zone. If I also tap on the blue, it just scrolls up for me and moves to some older articles. So there are a series of articles about science and technology. One of them that I found really interesting is this one called A Light Touch. It's about using fiber optic cable for all sorts of different purposes. So I can press Explore, and now I can do different things. This particular one is going to ask me to shake the iPad to learn what happens if a big truck, heavy truck, is moving over a particular pipe and a gas pipeline and causing compression problems. If I shake this, it will undo the display, and that would be bad, wouldn't it, Patrick? So I won't do this. I'll just forget it and give you the sense that there are so many different exercises. There are things where I can pinch and squeeze, I can expand, I can tap on a pipe to see what happens when it gets disrupted and how gas can leak and so on. So it's just an opportunity to introduce a new way of seeing and understanding complex content. My last example which I'm pleased is going to get in time, is a game. So this is the Sherlock Holmes game, The Hound of the Baskervilles. And again, this is from Playfish. A lot of their content is rushed to market very quickly. Their model is get it out there, get a bit of interest, and move on to the next title. Use a lot of the assets and the art capacity inside their development teams to just keep working and producing product. So, of course, you've got the sound. You've also got a little bit of advertising at the top. But we can get a sort of a graphic novel style, animated cartoon with a bit of the requisite violence always required in every video game, right? Of course, we're reminded that violence is a part of storytelling for all of humanity.
It seems that we have a visitor.
All right, so now we begin the backstory, and we're getting narration.
Hello,
We've
Sir
also got
Henry
text,
Baskerville.
and later
Did
on
you
we
have
can
a
actually
clip?
play
But how do you
through
know who
the
I am?
story
I
of the
have not
Hound of the
announced my
Baskervilles.
visit. By looking at your...
All right, so I think I'll leave that now and go back to my show and wrap up. So what we've seen is a series of different products that offer different opportunities, and I want to reiterate that word that Sabine gave us because I think it's quite right, opportunities for doing interesting new things. How do you get to the point of producing this content? Well, the first place to start is, I'm pleased to say, the Copyright Agency, as of today, are launching their guide to digital publishing in Australia. And I've had a look at this and could find, they asked me, do I want to add anything? And I could find nothing to add. It is a really beautiful piece of support for the community. So I highly commend this to you. It is the best starting point in Australia. It's got Australian examples of companies that are doing some interesting things. There might be some networking in that, but there's also the opportunity to learn about the background technology. Now, I found an article a couple of weeks ago by Greenfield in this Digital Book World blog website, and it basically talks about how publishers should prepare for EPUB 3, the new publishing standard. There are just three things I want to highlight. The first is new ways of thinking about content, rich in social media. I think I've shown that today and shown some of the possibilities and affordances. The second point is new workflows. This is a big one, and it's going to be an expensive one, and that is to think about publishing timelines that are more commonly associated with the electronic arts, the digital arts, games, and so on. There are new production logistics that are necessary, including machine and software that you might need to think about. But remember, neither you nor I probably are experts in digital publishing per se, that is to say, making games and using things like JavaScript and HTML5 and perhaps using Unity 3D and those sorts of tools. But there are lots of people out there. They're graduating from, here's my plug, right? They're graduating from universities all over Australia, and they're not actually as expensive as they are in New York. In New York City right now, to get somebody fully qualified in HTML5, it's $95,000. In Australia, it's about half that. So that's the good news. So I'm going to be indulgent as well. And so you could look to game developers to help you. This is my son, Alec. Hard to see him there. I had this picture taken last night for me. He is doing something really interesting, and this is about why we need to be publishing digitally. He is building the city of Troy using materials that will burn to a certain point, according to the historical record, so that he can give a talk in his class on the burning of the city of Troy. And he's doing this in something you might have heard about called Minecraft. So he's using rubble that will crack and fall down, and he's using timber or wood that he's going to set alight, and he's going to do a screen capture and then put this in his slideshow. That's my boy. So here's the promise from the beginning. What's possible? Well, it turns out that this mix of EPUB 3 standard, which is actually an HTML, XHTML base standard, HTML5 and JavaScript can allow you to build intelligent agents inside books. It could very well be that with the sensors in books, with the cameras in books, so if my hand is shaking and the iPad is shaking, it knows that I'm nervous. If perhaps it sees the camera sees that I'm smiling, if of course I let it, then perhaps it knows that I'm feeling happy about my experience and will provide me additional experiences like this. I think in terms of reinforcing studying, this could be a really good thing. And it beats Smarties between the pages of a very thick law text, right? If you could get your law text to actually encourage you and see how you're feeling and love you back for putting the effort into the textbook, wouldn't that be fantastic for education? Maybe. But basically, of course, I'm referring to the experience economy and building content that suits contextually every individual who wants it. But here's the catch. We need bandwidth. Because as I downloaded books, and I'm finding it's quite remarkable, most of the books I'm downloading now, the ebooks that I'm downloading, are bigger than any games I download. So if we want this brave new future, we really do, and I want to really reinforce what Sabine said, we do need to encourage those pipes. And that's all I wanted to say. Thank you very much indeed.